black maid hides millions and surprises the millionaire with a secret inheritance of $7 million. Eileen, bless her quiet soul, was the housekeeper at Blackwood Manor. For years, she'd floated through those gilded halls, dusting antique furniture and serving tea to the Cartwrights, those blue-blooded New Yorkers. Nobody suspected she was anything other than, well, Eileen. A widow, a mom, estranged from her son, Mikey. A regular, salt-of-the-earth kinda gal. But honey, let me tell you, Eileen was sitting on the secret hotter than a summer sidewalk. Then, bam, one gloomy October day, a fancy letter arrived. Inside, news that Eileen had inherited $7 million from a great-aunt Millie she never even knew existed. Can you even imagine? $7 million. Enough to buy a beachfront condo in Florida, pack things up with Mikey, and tell the Cartwrights to, well, you know, find another maid. She spilled the beans to Sarah Jenkins, her lawyer and friend, expecting cheers and champagne. But Sarah, bless her cautious heart, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Due diligence, she kept muttering. Potential complications. Complications? With $7 million? What complications could there possibly be? That night, the wind howled like a banshee, and guess who showed up at the manor? Mikey, looking all sheepish and sorry. Word travels fast, especially when it involves cold, hard cash. The Cartwrights, those gossiping magpies, had already spread the news like wildfire. Was Mikey back for real? Or was he just after a piece of the pie? Eileen's mama heart was pounding. Before she could even ask him what he wanted, crash! A sound like thunder ripped through the silence. Mr. Cartwright himself stood there, pale as a ghost, staring at a shattered window in the library. "Someone was here," he gasped, "looking for something. About Aunt Millie." Aunt Millie? What in the world could be so important about a great-aunt nobody even knew? The cops came, sirens blaring, flashing lights painting the storm clouds red and blue. But Eileen knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. Was this money a blessing or a curse wrapped in a pretty bow? What dark secrets were buried with Aunt Millie? Secrets that could cost Eileen everything. Antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários, de qual cidade você está assistindo? Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. The cops came, sirens blaring, flashing lights painting the storm clouds red and blue. But Eileen knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. Was this money a blessing? Or a curse wrapped in a pretty bow? What dark secrets were buried with Aunt Millie? Secrets that could cost Eileen everything. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, mirroring the knot in Eileen's stomach. She brewed herself a pot of strong coffee. None of that fancy Cartwright stuff, just good old diner blend, and tried to make sense of it all. $7 million, a broken window, Mikey showing up out of the blue, and Aunt Millie's secret. It was like a bad soap opera, only way too real. Sarah Jenkins, bless her sensible shoes, arrived with a stack of papers and a grim expression. "Eileen, we need to talk about Aunt Millie," she said, her voice low. It turns out she wasn't exactly a saint. "Huh, not a saint? What'd she do? Steal cookies from the Girl Scouts?" Eileen asked, trying to lighten the mood. Sarah didn't crack a smile. She was involved in, let's just say, some shady dealings back in the day. Real estate scams, offshore accounts, the whole shebang. This money might not be as clean as we thought. Eileen felt like she'd been punched in the gut. Shady dealings? That $7 million was supposed to be her ticket to a new life, not a Pandora's box of trouble. So what now? We dig, Sarah said, her eyes steely. We find out exactly what Aunt Millie was up to, and if anyone else is looking for this money. Just then, Mikey walked in, looking sheepish. Mom, can we talk? Eileen eyed him warily. Was he really sorry, or just angling for a handout? Before she could say a word, the phone rang. It was Detective Miller, the lead investigator on the break-in. Mrs. O'Malley, we found something at the scene, he said, his voice tight. Something you need to see. Eileen, Sarah, and Mikey piled into Sarah's beat-up Volvo and followed Detective Miller to the Blackwood Manor Library. The shuttered window had been boarded up, but the room was still a mess. Detective Miller pointed to a small, intricately carved wooden box lying on the floor near the broken window. This was hidden behind a loose brick in the wall, he said. It was empty, but we think it's what the intruder was after. Eileen picked up the box. It was beautiful, but old, the wood worn smooth with age. As she turned it over in her hands, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A tiny inscription on the bottom. She squinted, trying to make out the faded letters. What does it say? Sarah asked, peering over her shoulder. Eileen read the inscription aloud, her voice trembling. For my beloved daughter, Eleanor. Eleanor. Eileen. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She looked at Detective Miller, then at Sarah, then at Mikey, her mind reeling. But my name isn't Eleanor, she stammered. It's Eileen. Eileen O'Malley. Detective Miller frowned. Are you sure about that, Mrs. O'Malley? He pulled out a file and opened it to a photograph. A photograph of a young woman who looked exactly like Eileen, only younger, standing next to Aunt Millie. This is a photo of Eleanor Cartwright, taken about 30 years ago, Detective Miller said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Eleanor Cartwright, the long-lost daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright. Eileen gasped. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She was a Cartwright, the daughter of the blue-blooded New Yorkers she'd been serving tea to for years. Aunt Millie wasn't just a great-aunt. She was her mother. And that $7 million? It wasn't a surprise. Inheritance. It was her birthright. But the biggest shock of all, the Cartwrights. They knew. Mr. Cartwright's pale face, his strange behavior after the break-in, he knew exactly who she was, and he'd let her scrub their toilets and dust their antiques for years, knowing all along that she was his daughter. Mikey stared at her, his jaw slack. Mom, what the hell? Eileen couldn't breathe. She looked from Mikey to Sarah to Detective Miller, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. Her whole life, everything she thought she knew about herself, was a lie. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her head. She clutched her temples, a wave of nausea washing over her. The room began to spin. She stumbled, reaching out for something to hold on to, but there was nothing. Then, darkness. As Eileen collapsed to the floor, unconscious, a single thought echoed through her mind. What other lies had they told her? What other secrets were they hiding? And what would they do now that the truth was out? As Eileen collapsed to the floor, unconscious, a single thought echoed through her mind. What other lies had they told her? What other secrets were they hiding? And what would they do now that the truth was out? Then, nothing. Just a black void. Then, a whisper. Eleanor. She woke up in a hospital bed. Sarah was there, her face etched with worry. Mikey was slumped in a chair, looking lost. "What happened?" Eileen croaked, her throat dry. "You fainted," Sarah said gently. "Stress, shock, it's understandable." "The Cartwrights," Eileen started, her mind still reeling. "They knew. We need to focus on your health right now." Sarah interrupted, squeezing her hand. "Everything else can wait." But it couldn't wait. Not anymore. Not after finding out. Her whole life was a lie. Days turned into a week. Eileen stayed in the hospital supposedly for observation, but she knew the Cartwrights were buying time. Time to figure out what to do with her. One afternoon, Mr. Cartwright himself walked into her room. He looked defeated. "Older. Eleanor," he said, his voice cracking. We owe you an explanation." Eileen just stared at him, her heart a cold stone in her chest. He sat down heavily in the chair beside her bed. "Your mother, Nilly, she was a wild spirit. Your mother and I, we were young, foolish. We eloped. My family, they didn't approve. They wanted me to marry someone from our kind. They pressured me. I caved." He looked away, shame etched on his face. "I let Millie go. I told her I didn't want her or the child she carried." Eileen gasped. "And you just left her? With nothing?" "We gave her money," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Enough to start a new life. We thought, we hoped, she'd be better off without us. We were wrong." "Better off?" Eileen repeated, her voice rising. "She raised me as a maid in your house. You watched me scrub your floors for years, knowing I was your daughter." "We didn't know," he cried, his voice desperate. "Millie never told us. She just disappeared. We searched for years, but we couldn't find her. We thought she'd changed her name, started a new life somewhere far away. We never dreamed she was right under our noses." Eileen didn't believe him. Not for a second. Then he dropped the bomb. "Your mother, she wasn't who you think she was, Eleanor." Eileen frowned. "What do you mean? She was a housekeeper, a widow. She was a con artist, Eleanor. A master manipulator. She seduced me, took my money, and then ran off with another man. A gangster named Sal DeMarco." Eileen stared at him, speechless. "A gangster? Aunt Millie, it was too much." "That $7 million, Mr. Cartwright continued, his voice trembling. "It wasn't from some long-lost relative. It was stolen money, DeMarco's money, and he's still looking for it." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The break-in, the wooden box, Mikey's sudden appearance. It wasn't about family or forgiveness. It was about money, stolen money. And then the door burst open. Not Detective Miller. Not Sarah. Not Mikey. 3 men in dark suits strode into the room, their faces hard, their eyes cold. One of them stepped forward, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Hello, Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm Sal DeMarco's son, Tony, and I believe you have something that belongs to my family." He pulled out a gun, but it wasn't pointed at Eileen. It was pointed at Mr. Cartwright. "You see, Mr. Cartwright," Tony DeMarco purred, "my daddy always said you were a sucker, and suckers always pay their debts." And then everything went black again. Only this time it wasn't from shock. And then everything went black again. Only this time it wasn't from shock. Then silence. A thick, suffocating silence, like the kind that descends after a tornado rips through, leaving only debris and disbelief in its wake. Eileen wasn't out for long this time. When she blinked awake, the fluorescent lights of the hospital room seemed even harsher, more sterile. Sarah was gone. Mikey was gone. Mr. Cartwright, gone too. But Tony DeMarco was still there, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. The gun was nowhere in sight. Where are they? Eileen stammered, her head throbbing. Tony chuckled, a low, menacing sound. Relax, Sleeping Beauty. They're busy. Mr. Cartwright is, shall we say, indisposed. Mikey's got a proposition to consider. Eileen's blood ran cold. What have you done? Just business, Tony shrugged. See, your dear old dad here thought he could play both sides. He thought he could keep the money and keep you safe. Turns out, he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He pushed himself off the wall and walked towards her, his shadow falling over the bed. But you, Eleanor, you're interesting. You're the key to all of this. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her cheek. Eileen flinched. You know where the money is, don't you? He whispered. Aunt Millie must have told you something. A clue? A hint? Anything. Eileen shook her head, her mind racing. She didn't know anything. She was just a housekeeper. Or, well, she thought she was. I swear, I don't know what you're talking about. Tony's smile vanished. Don't play coy with me, Eleanor. My patience is wearing thin. And believe me, you don't want to see me when I'm angry. He stepped back, pulling out his phone. He dialed a number, then held it to his ear. Yeah, it's me. Is he ready to talk? Good, put him on. He looked at Eileen, his eyes cold and empty. Say hello to your son, Eleanor. The voice on the other end was weak, but unmistakable. Mom, help me. Mikey! They had Mikey! Mikey! What are they doing to you? Eileen cried, her voice breaking. Tell me where the money is, Eleanor, Tony hissed, pressing the phone closer to her ear. Or your little boy is gonna have a very bad day. Eileen's mind went blank. She had to protect Mikey. But she didn't know anything. I don't know, please, I swear! A sharp cry of pain echoed through the phone. Eileen gasped. All right, I'll tell you, she shouted. Just don't hurt him. Tony smirked. That's my girl. Now where is it? Eileen racked her brain, desperately trying to remember anything at all that Aunt Millie might have said. A location? A code? A name? And then it hit her. Aunt Millie had always loved birds. She had bird feeders hanging outside every window. She collected porcelain birds. She even had a bird tattoo on her ankle. And one time, when Eileen was a little girl, Aunt Millie had given her a small wooden birdhouse. The birdhouse? Eileen blurted out. It's in the birdhouse. Tony's eyes widened. What birdhouse? The one Aunt Millie gave me. It's in the attic of my old house. She said she hid something inside. Tony hung up the phone, his face alight with excitement. All right, Eleanor, let's go find some money. He grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the bed. Eileen stumbled, her head still spinning. She was weak, disoriented, terrified. But she had to do this. For Mikey. As they left the hospital room, Eileen glanced back. A wave of nausea washed over her as she realized something was off. Very, very off. The hallways were empty. Too empty. No nurses, no doctors, no patients. Just silence. And then she saw it. A small white feather lying on the floor near the doorway. A white feather, exactly like the ones that adorned the porcelain birds in Aunt Millie's collection. But Aunt Millie had been cremated years ago, and that specific collection had been sold at an auction. She hadn't owned any of those birds, including the white one, in over 20 years. Eileen stopped dead in her tracks, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a message, a warning. But from whom? And what did it mean? Then a voice, calm and devoid of any emotion, came from right behind her. Wrong answer, Eleanor. Wrong answer, Eleanor. The voice was like ice. Cold, sharp, unforgiving. Eileen spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. But it wasn't Tony DeMarco. Standing behind her, blocking the hallway, was Sarah Jenkins. Her sensible shoes, her grim expression, everything was the same, except for the gun she was holding, pointed directly at Eileen. "Sarah, what is this?" Eileen stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Sarah didn't answer. Her eyes, usually filled with warmth and concern, were now hard and empty. "You always were a bit slow on the uptake, Eleanor. All those years wiping up the Cartwrights' messes, and you never suspected a thing." "Suspected what? What's going on?" Eileen cried, her mind reeling. "Oh, honey, the game is so much bigger than you could possibly imagine," Sarah said, a cruel smile twisting her lips. "Tony DeMarco, a two-bit thug. Mr. Cartwright, a pawn. Aunt Millie, just a stepping stone. Then who are you?" Sarah chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Let's just say I'm the cleaning lady, the one who tidies up after everyone else makes a mess, and Millie made a big mess." Suddenly, the pieces started to fall into place. Sarah's insistence on due diligence, her cautious heart, her constant presence in Eileen's life. It wasn't friendship, it was control. "You knew all along," Eileen whispered, her voice trembling. "You knew about the Cartwrights, about Aunt Millie, about everything." "Of course I did," Sarah said, her voice dripping with disdain. "I orchestrated it all." Millie was getting sloppy, threatening to reveal everything, so I took care of her. Made it look like a heart attack. Easy peasy. Eileen gasped. "You killed her?" "Don't act so shocked, Eleanor. She wasn't your aunt. She was your handler. You were always meant to inherit that money. It was part of the plan." "What plan?" "The plan to bring down the Cartwrights," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with manic energy. "They ruined my family, Eleanor, years ago. Stole everything we had, left us with nothing. I swore I'd make them pay." Eileen stared at her, speechless. Sarah, a vengeful mastermind. It was insane. "But why me?" "Because you're their daughter, you silly goose. The perfect weapon. They'd never suspect their own flesh and blood was out for revenge." Eileen shook her head, desperately trying to make sense of it all. "But I don't want revenge. I just want my son back." Sarah laughed. "Your son? Mikey? He's fine. He's with my people. He's been working with me for years." Eileen's heart stopped. Mikey working with Sarah? It couldn't be true. "No, no, you're lying." Just then, Mikey appeared at the end of the hallway. He looked different, older, harder, and he was holding a gun. "Mom," he said, his voice cold and emotionless. "It's time to end this." Eileen stared at him, her eyes wide with horror. Her own son betraying her. "Mikey, what are you doing?" He didn't answer. He just raised the gun. And then everything went black. But this time, it wasn't from a gunshot. It was from the blinding flash of a camera. Suddenly, the hallway was flooded with light. Reporters swarmed around them, shouting questions, snapping photos. TV cameras whirred. "Mrs. Cartwright, can you comment on the allegations of fraud? Mr. O'Malley, is it true you were working with Sarah Jenkins to blackmail the Cartwright family? Sarah Jenkins, how do you respond to the charges of murder and conspiracy?" Eileen blinked, disoriented. What was happening? And then she saw him, standing behind the reporters, a smug look on his face. Mr. Cartwright, alive and perfectly fine. He raised his hand, silencing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice booming, "I'd like to introduce you to the true face of greed and betrayal. My daughter, Eleanor, and her accomplice, Mikey O'Malley." Eileen stared at him, her mind reeling. It was all a setup. He knew Sarah was planning something. He knew about Mikey. He used her. He used them all. But why? And then she saw it. A small, almost imperceptible device clipped to Mr. Cartwright's lapel. A microphone. He was broadcasting live to the world. And then the image cut to black. A single line of white text then filled the screen. Season 2 coming soon. The image cut to black. Season 2 coming soon. Wait, what? Season 2? Like a TV show? Eileen's head swam. The lights, the cameras, the reporters. It wasn't real. It was all staged. She looked at Mr. Cartwright. A cold, calculating smile playing on his lips. He knew she was going to be there. He knew Sarah was involved. He'd set them all up. For ratings? Then she saw Mikey. He was looking at her, his face a mask of disgust, shame. But there was something else there, too. Something she couldn't quite place. And Sarah was just standing there, her face blank, as if she were waiting for her cue. Suddenly, the studio lights blazed even brighter. A woman with a headset rushed over to Mr. Cartwright, whispering urgently in his ear. He nodded, then turned back. To the cameras, his smile widening. "And now, folks," he announced, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "for the moment you've all been waiting for, the shocking reveal of Eleanor's real father." The crowd gasped. Eileen felt like she was going to be sick. What was he doing? What was he going to say? The music swelled, dramatic and suspenseful. Mr. Cartwright paused for effect, then pointed, not at himself, not at some random stranger, but at Mikey. That's right, folks. The father of Eleanor Cartwright is none other than her own son, Mikey. The studio erupted. The reporters went wild. The cameras zoomed in on Eileen's face, capturing her shock, her horror, her utter disbelief. Mikey? Her son? Her father? It was impossible. It couldn't be true. She looked at Mikey, searching for some sign, some denial. But he just stood there, his expression unreadable. But how? Eileen stammered, her voice barely audible above the din. Mr. Cartwright chuckled. A little secret the O'Malley family kept hidden, wouldn't you say? Scene's dear Millie was a bit more creative in her deceptions than we all thought. Sarah stepped forward, a wicked grin spreading across her face. It's true, Eleanor. Mikey is your son. And your father. A family affair, wouldn't you say? Eileen's world tilted on its axis. Incest, betrayal, a lifetime of lies. It was too much. She couldn't process it. But then something even more shocking happened. The studio doors burst open. A SWAT team stormed in, guns drawn. They ignored Eileen, Mr. Cartwright, Sarah, even Mikey. They went straight for the cameras. And then they started shooting. Not at people, at the equipment. Smashing cameras, ripping out cables, destroying everything in sight. Chaos erupted. The reporters screamed. The studio lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. When the chaos subsided, the SWAT team had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Mr. Cartwright was on the floor, cradling a broken camera. Sarah was screaming obscenities. Mikey was gone. And Eileen was alone, in the dark, confused, terrified. Then a single spotlight illuminated a figure standing at the back of the studio. A figure she recognized instantly. Aunt Millie. But it wasn't the kindly, unassuming housekeeper she remembered. This woman was different, harder, more dangerous. "Hello, Eleanor," she said, her voice cold and unfamiliar. "Did you really think I was dead? "Hello, Eleanor," she said, her voice cold and unfamiliar. "Did you really think I was dead?" Eileen couldn't breathe. "Aunt Millie? Alive? But how? But the funeral, the ashes." Aunt Millie laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, honey, that was just a show. A very convincing show, I might add." She stepped closer, her eyes glittering in the spotlight. "You see, Eleanor, I needed to disappear, to get away from all this mess. The Cartwrights, the DeMarcos, they were all closing in. I needed a clean slate." "But why? Why put me through all this?" Eileen cried, her voice cracking. "Because you were always part of the plan, Eleanor. You just didn't know it. You were the perfect pawn. Naive, trusting, easily manipulated." Eileen's heart shattered. Everyone she had ever loved, everyone she had ever trusted had betrayed her. And Mikey? What about Mikey? Aunt Millie's smile widened. "Oh, Mikey's been a good boy. He's always been loyal to me. He knew what was coming. He played his part perfectly." Eileen looked around, desperately searching for Mikey. But he was nowhere to be seen. He was gone, just like everyone else she cared about. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens to me?" Aunt Millie shrugged. "That depends. Eleanor, are you going to be a good girl, or are you going to make things difficult?" Eileen didn't answer. She couldn't. She was too numb, too shocked, too broken. Suddenly, the doors to the studio slammed shut. The lights flickered and died, plunging the room into complete darkness. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the silence. It wasn't Eileen's. It was Aunt Millie's. Then a single gunshot. Silence. And then a voice. A voice Eileen recognized instantly. "Sorry, Mom," Mikey said. His voice cold and emotionless. "But you were getting in the way." A single spotlight flickered back to life, illuminating Mikey. He was standing over Aunt Millie's lifeless body, a gun in his hand. He turned to Eileen, his eyes empty, devoid of any emotion. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, a sinister smile twisting his lips. "We're going to be a family again, just like we always should have been." He took a step closer, his hand reaching out towards her. But then, something unexpected happened. A trapdoor in the floor opened beneath Eileen, sending her plummeting into darkness. She landed with a thud on a cold, hard surface. She was in a dark, damp tunnel. As her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Scrawled on the wall in blood-red paint were 3 words. "Welcome home, Eleanor. Welcome home, Eleanor." Home? This was no home. This was a tomb. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something else. Something metallic. Blood? She scrambled to her feet, her hands reaching out, groping in the darkness. The walls were cold, damp stone. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for her to stand. Where was she? How far down had she fallen? And what did that message? What mean? "Welcome home, Eleanor." A shiver ran down her spine. It was like something out of a horror movie. But this was her life. This was real. Suddenly, a light flickered on at the end of the tunnel. A dim, flickering light, like a candle in the distance. Hope surged through her. Someone was there. Someone who could help her. She started walking towards the light, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading her deeper and deeper into the earth. As she got closer, she could make out a figure standing in the light. A small, hunched figure. An old woman. As Eleanor got closer to the light, she could just barely make out what looked like an extremely old woman. When Eleanor got close enough to see the face, her heart nearly stopped. It was Millie. But it was a completely different Millie, than the one she thought she knew. She was hunched, with skin more gray than brown, and looked ancient. The woman then spoke in a raspy but feminine voice. "Took you long enough." Eileen stopped dead in her tracks. "Millie? Here? But, Hattie, but I saw you," Eileen stammered. "I saw Mikey." The woman laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Oh, Mikey's a good boy. He always does what he's told." She stepped closer, and Eileen realized that this wasn't Aunt Millie. Not exactly. This was her twin sister. "Surprised? I thought so. Let's call me Maud. Millie got all the charm." Maud gestured for Eileen to follow her further into the tunnel. Eileen did so cautiously. Maud stopped in front of an ornately decorated mirror and gestured toward it. Eileen took a closer look to see what Maud wanted her to see. The second Eileen looked at it, an array of images cascaded into her consciousness all at once. It was like a supercut of her entire life flashing before her eyes. Eileen began to sob uncontrollably as she slowly fell to the floor. "A bit much, isn't it?" Maud said dryly. All right. You don't need to keep staring at that mirror." Maud flicked her hand, and the mirror went dark. "You've seen enough, I promise." "But," Eileen croaked, "what does this have to do with anything?" Maud's face suddenly turned serious. "I need your help, Eileen. Or should I say, Eleanor, we need to bring down Cartwright Enterprises." "What?" "He's a horrible man, you know. Not just to your mother, but all of us. Look at what we had to do in order to survive. Eileen, you're the only one who can help me end this." "All right, but how?" "Here," Maud handed Eleanor a small box. "This is all the information you need. There's only one catch." "There's always a catch, isn't there?" "You have to kill Mr. Cartwright. Once you do, all the evidence will be released, and the world will see the truth." Eileen felt conflicted. "I don't know, Maud. I know it's a big ask, but you're the only one who can do this. Think of the future children who won't suffer due to this man." Eileen looked at the box and back at Maud. "All right, I'll do it." Maud's dead look turned to glee. "Oh, thank God, this has taken way too long." A door then creaked open nearby. "I guess you didn't realize I was listening in right next door, did you?" It was Mikey, but he had a gun, and it was pointed at Maud. Maud then spoke calmly. "Mikey, I thought you were on my side. Didn't you want to get revenge on—" Bang! Mikey had shot Maud point blank. "Sorry, Maud, but Eleanor is my mom, and you weren't treating her right." "What the hell, Mikey?" Mikey then grabbed Eleanor's hand. "Come on, Mom, let's get out of here. I know how to get to the real home where everyone is waiting." "Come on, Mom, let's get out of here. I know how to get to the real home where everyone is waiting." Real home? What the heck was he talking about? Home was wherever. She could finally catch a break and maybe, just maybe, start over. But Mikey, he was looking at her like she was a prize he'd finally won, and it wasn't making her feel good. They started running. The tunnel was a maze, twisting and turning, but Mikey seemed to know exactly where he was going. He was pulling her along, his grip tight, too tight. "Mikey, slow down. Where are we going?" He just grinned, that same creepy smile. "You'll see, Mom. It's gonna be great. Just you and me, forever." Forever? That word sent a chill down her spine. It sounded like a threat, not a promise. They came to a dead end, a solid wall of rock. Eileen stared at it, confused. "Mikey, there's nothing here." He chuckled. "Oh, but there is, Mom. You just gotta know where to look." He pressed his hand against the wall, and a section of it slid open, revealing a hidden passage. Eileen gasped. This was insane. They stepped through the opening, and Eileen's jaw dropped. It wasn't a passage. It was a room. A huge room. And it was filled with people. all dressed in the same dark suits, all staring at her with the same blank, emotionless expressions. But that wasn't the shocking part. Standing in the center of the room, surrounded by the crowd, was Aunt Millie, and she was holding a baby, a tiny, sleeping baby. "Welcome home, Eleanor," Millie said, her voice soft, almost maternal. "Meet your granddaughter." Granddaughter? Eileen's head was spinning. Whose baby was this? And why was Millie acting like everything was normal? Then Mikey stepped forward. He knelt down beside Millie and gently stroked the baby's cheek. "She's beautiful, isn't she, Mom?" he said, his voice filled with tenderness. Eileen stared at him, her mind reeling. "Mikey, what's going on? Whose baby is this?" He looked up at her, his eyes shining with a strange, unsettling light. "It's our baby, Mom," he said. "Yours and mine." The world went black. This time, it wasn't from shock or fear. It was from the crushing weight of the truth. Mikey, her son, her lover, the father of her child. Incest wasn't just a storyline on a trashy TV show. It was her life, and she had no idea. As she stood there, numb and uncomprehending, the crowd began to chant, a low, rhythmic murmur that grew louder and louder until it filled the entire room. "Welcome home, Eleanor. Welcome home, Eleanor. Welcome home." Then Millie placed the baby in Eileen's arms and kissed her on the forehead. "Take care of her, Mom." Millie then smiled. "Your time has come." Eileen olhou para o bebê, pequeno, indefeso, fruto de horror inimaginável. Nó se formou em sua garganta. Millie, Mikey, o que eles tinham feito? A multidão cantava hipnotizada. O cheiro de mofo era forte, abafando. Medo. Puro medo. De repente, uma sirene cortou o ar. Lá fora, longe, mas vindo para perto. Policia? A multidão parou de cantar. Millie rangeu os dentes. Já era, ela sibilou. Mike puxou Eileen para mais perto. "A gente foge, mãe, juntos." Mas Eileen não se moveu. Olhou para o bebê em seus braços. Uma menina, inocente. "Não, chega." Eileen ergueu a cabeça, olhou para Mike, depois para Millie. Seus olhos eram como gelo. "Eu não vou a lugar nenhum," ela disse, sua voz firme, surpreendendo até a si mesma. Millie fez um gesto. Os membros da seita avançaram. "Mike, vai," Eileen sussurrou. "Salva você. E essa criança. Sai dessa loucura." Os olhos de Mike se encheram de lágrimas. "Eu não posso te deixar, mãe." "Você tem que me deixar," Eileen respondeu. "É a única maneira. Corre!" Mike hesitou por um segundo, depois pegou na mão de Millie e sumiu na escuridão do túnel. A multidão se dispersou atrás deles. Eileen ficou sozinha, com o bebê. As sirenes se aproximavam. Luzes vermelhas e azuis piscavam na entrada do túnel. Eileen sorriu. Finalmente. Acabou. Então a porta explodiu. Agentes do FBI invadiram o local, armas apontadas. "Mãos para cima. Deixe o bebê no chão." Eileen obedeceu. Colocou a criança suavemente no chão, levantou as mãos. Um agente se aproximou, algemando-a. "Você está presa por sequestro, conspiração e, bem, uma longa lista de coisas." Enquanto a levavam para fora, Eileen olhou para trás, para o túnel escuro, para o bebê. Ela sabia que não tinha terminado, nem de perto. O que Millie e Mike estavam tramando. E o que seria daquela criança agora? Na cela fria, sozinha com seus pensamentos, uma pergunta consumia. O que a aguardava no futuro? E você, meu amigo? Tá esperando o quê? Se inscreva agora. Você precisa se inscrever agora para não perder a continuação dessa saga insana. Só os verdadeiros fãs entendem a importância de apoiar o canal. Esmague o like. Este é o momento de demonstrar seu apoio. Esmaga o botão de like agora para alimentar o algoritmo e garantir que essa história chegue a mais pessoas. Inunde os comentários. Eu quero saber o que você achou. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas reações e teorias sobre esse final absurdo. Compartilhe já. Não espere nem mais um segundo. Compartilhe instantaneamente esse vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer esse desfecho alucinante. A próxima história pode ser ainda mais surpreendente. Não perca por nada.